Sharon, she, her, lives and works in Hobart on Nipaluna Country. Sharon is a postpartum professional with a decades-long background in nursing. Her nursing career and specialization in paediatrics and neonatal intensive care that has seen her care for many mothers and babies in the acute hospital setting has prepared her well for her new career as a postpartum doula. Her own personal experience as a mother and grandmother and her experience having an unwell baby herself have also given her immense amounts of wisdom and a unique capacity to understand, support, empower, nurture and hold space for women in pregnancy, birth and postpartum. Sharon is also an infant massage instructor and baby and child first aid educator. You can learn more about Sharon and or connect with her via the links below. I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation. Welcome to the Whole Doula podcast. The Whole Doula podcast is a conversation space for doulas and birth workers to talk about the diverse paths that led them to birth work, as well as the diverse and unique skills, interests and offerings they bring to their birth-keeping roles. Here I dive into conversations with others who may be wondering how to bring the different aspects and experiences of their own lives into their roles as doulas in business. After all, there is more than one way to doula, and I'd love to help others see the connections between all the different parts of themselves, to see themselves as a whole doula. I am your host, Mary Giordano, doula, birth educator, counsellor and doula business mentor, and this is the Whole Doula podcast. I hope you enjoy listening. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sharon, on the Whole Doula podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear firstly how you refer to yourself, if you refer to yourself as a doula or a birth worker, or what's your sort of role in the birth-keeping world as you see it?
Well, in my documents and marketing, I tend to refer to myself as a postpartum professional, simply because I feel like many people out in the community don't know what a doula is. And then there's some people who have quite a misunderstanding about what a doula is. I'm trained, qualified as a birth and postpartum doula, but I just practice in the postpartum area. So I just feel like as an introduction, it's helpful to say postpartum professional. Once I'm in conversation with people though, I'm quite happy to use the term doula when I can explain and, clarify what that actually is.
Yeah, beautiful. It's very interesting to speak to people who've noticed a change in the frequency of use of the term doula over the years. I just spoke to somebody this morning who actually had a postpartum doula herself. She's in New York 21 years ago and she wasn't familiar with the term then. But yeah, I've spoken to a lot of people who say that they don't come across that so often anymore, where people don't know what a doula is. But of course, we do still come across that. So you said that you're trained in birth and postpartum, but you're only working as a postpartum doula at the moment, or a postpartum professional. Is there a reason why you're not doing birth support as well, or is it something you intend to do?
Probably the most standout reason is because I actually provide a few other services in my business. I do infant massage classes and I teach baby and child first aid and do classes. So I have a lot of scheduled classes, which makes me on call pretty tricky with scheduling. I am available as a birth doula in special circumstances, particularly if it's a planned birth date, but I don't advertise.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So you said you're about 1 year or so into your business journey. Is that right?
Yeah. So I officially launched my postpartum service on the 1st of July last year. So just clicked over my first anniversary. Yeah.
Congratulations. So you timed it with the new financial year.
Yeah.
For those
Yeah.
listening outside of Australia, our financial year is from the 1st of July to the 30th of June, in case that didn't make sense to you. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, Sharon, and how you came to become a postpartum doula?
Okay. So officially, I've only been a postpartum doula for the last 12 to 18 months. But unofficially, I've probably been providing postpartum care and support to new mums for decades, particularly in my work in the neonatal intensive care unit. I'm working with mums from birth, right from the get-go. More recently, 2 of my adult daughters have had 3 babies between them, and I was basically their living doula for each of those births.
Mm-hmm.
The most recent one, my youngest daughter, in that early postpartum period, she got quite sick, like really sick, and she was unwell for about 8 months, and a lot of that time bedridden with an autoimmune condition that was triggered off in the postpartum period. And I did a lot of research into that and actually discovered that that's not all that unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily as severely affected as she was, but, you know, the postpartum depletion and increased immune response. And so during that period, a lot of people were saying, oh, I wish I had you to have been around when I had a baby, or how did your girls manage without you? And it led me to, you know, take a bit more notice in my community and realise there's a lot of new mums who don't have a lot of support for one reason or another. So that was probably the catalyst for me undertaking formal training and doing postpartum work officially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing. I would challenge that there's a great need among just new parents for support, because I think there's a great need amongst even seasoned parents for support. A lot of us are unsupported well beyond the postpartum period, and this depletion can go on for years and years and years.
Absolutely. And a lot of people also have, well, in my experience, a bit of a misconception that it's only first-time mums that really need that support. And I would challenge that and say you're a newborn mother with every new birth, because the family dynamics change with every addition to the family. So that experience of motherhood is different with your second, because now you've got 2 children, when it's your third. And in fact, the first postpartum client I supported officially was a mum having her 3rd baby. And after that time and the feedback that she gave me, she just wished that she'd had that service right from the get-go with the first baby and second. And
I
so
bet she did. Yeah, it's we don't know what we don't know, do we? And so we don't know what we're missing unless we experience it at some point. And
so true.
I find it interesting, you know, that when I'm hired by families as a birth doula by first-time parents or second-time or third-time, it's always interesting to me how they come to that decision. And particularly the first-time parents, I find it interesting that they actually even have that level of awareness that they really would benefit from the additional support, because a lot of us the first time we are completely naive and we don't even realise that we need that support.
Yeah. And I guess that sort of also leads me into another big catalyst for wanting to support mums in that postpartum period, because my first experience at motherhood, while it was certainly more than I expected or anticipated, it was also a very wonderful, joyful, amazing time. And I was absolutely blindsided when I had my second baby, who was a very traumatic birth. She required CPR immediately after birth. She was whisked away. I was whisked away for emergency surgery. Came back from that to a really sick child who needed neonatal intensive care for a number of weeks. And then that time at home in that initial 18 months was just so hard. I was totally unprepared for that, both the separation from my toddler, but also going home with a child with complex needs and the grief. And so they were really hard times. And that's what led me into doing neonatal intensive care nursing.
You weren't doing that at the time. I was wondering if you were already, okay. So
No. So that personal experience has probably informed both my nursing practice and postpartum care is in wanting to provide what I needed back then. that I didn't get.
And didn't receive. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a common story. It's one that I resonate with a lot as well, because I didn't receive any support from postpartum support, and purely because of my own ignorance, I suppose. I didn't really understand the need, and I have issues ongoing 10 years later of depletion that I'm still only understanding the impacts of. And I know that can be compounded for decades for some women. And it's really tragic, and how a lot of us are obviously trying to change that story for other women, but sometimes serving from a place of depletion ourselves, which is a challenge. So are you still working in the hospital as a neonatal intensive care nurse as well, or are you just working in your business these days?
No, but just on a casual basis. So I do like to keep in that space because I think it helps me stay current and relevant with what that space is like and what parents and mothers in particular are experiencing in that space. But nowhere near as much as I used to.
Yeah. So you just do that on a casual basis, and primarily you're just working in your business now?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. I just mentioned before we started recording that I was actually born at the Calvary Hospital in Hobart. I'm from Hobart myself, and you've worked there sometimes.
Yes.
Were you working there in 1981?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
So do you service families all over Hobart, or what does it work
Hobart and southern Tasmania with my postpartum care. With my baby and child first aid, I go all around Tasmania with that.
And so that's a one-day course, is it, or is it a couple of days course?
It's just a few hours. It's an information service.
And so you take that all around Tasmania, which for those who are unfamiliar with Tasmania, it's one of our states. It's quite a small one, but it does, it's a beautiful state to drive around. And I'm wondering, how many doulas are there these days in Hobart? Well, I was actually considering with my partner, we were considering a move to Hobart a few years ago before we moved from Melbourne to regional Vic, where we actually live. We did consider moving back to Hobart because it's so beautiful, but it was too much. And at the time I was researching just to try and get an understanding of what the doula landscape is like there. I imagine it's grown in the past few years. Are there many of you?
Yeah, absolutely. There are far more postpartum doulas than there are birth doulas. There are some amazing doulas working in both the birth and postpartum areas, but probably more in the postpartum period as well. Yeah. And there's such a need. And, we all come with our own individual skill sets and strengths and flavours, if you like. So I think it's wonderful that there is a wealth of experience and choice.
Absolutely. I agree. Definitely collaboration over competition. We're all different, and we don't all, we're not all a good fit for every mum. So it's great that there's choice out there. And is there much networking happening amongst the doulas in Hobart? Are you getting together? Are you creating opportunities to learn from each other, or at least to, to socialise or debrief? Or
early last year, we formed a group of Southern Tasmanian birth practitioners, so not just doulas, but all sorts of people who were working in the pregnancy, birth or postpartum space. And we were having regular face-to-face catch-ups. That sort of tapered off, but there's still that Facebook group, I suppose, where people can at least connect if they want to. I've reached out to a number of doulas in my area and just caught up for coffee and just to connect, because I really value that. We're essentially working autonomously, and for me, that's quite different to working in a hospital space where you've got a team around you. So I really value being able to connect with other professionals. Yeah,
that's very different, particularly after such a long career in a different setting like that, where you'd be surrounded by lots of other colleagues at any given time, I imagine. And being on your own. I just spoke to somebody a little while ago who was talking about how in this work we're often learning as we go, learning the ropes. There's nobody next to us to tap on the shoulder to ask, what do I do now? What do I say now? And so we are just sort of thrown into it, and we have to figure it out. So it's great to be able to network and learn what others are doing, but also, who we can refer to if we don't have capacity to support somebody, or just, getting ideas and all of that from each other. So I'm wondering what your postpartum work looks like, because even that changes and varies quite a lot between postpartum doulas. some people prepare a lot of meals that they take with them to families. Some people prepare meals in homes. Some people don't do meals at all. What's the sort of what's your key interest or specialty in your postpartum support packages?
I guess a point of difference for me, perhaps to some other doulas, being in the mature age end of the spectrum and being a mother and a grandmother, I see myself as essentially a mother to the mothers. And so even my business name is Nourish and Nurture. And I see that as not just physically nourishing and nurturing, but also that emotional and even spiritual side of us as human beings. But I do love to cook.
Mm-hmm.
And so a big part of my support, I guess, is physically nourishing with meals and snacks that are helpful in being nutritious and playing a part in healing and restoring, but also just to be comforting and nice food for mums, essentially, but also for families, partners and kids. So I tend to offer as part of my package a welcome home meal and snack package. And often I deliver to the hospital while mums are in hospital snacks. I mean, yes, their meals are provided in hospital, but breastfeeding mums in particular are hungry in the middle of the night. And it's so nice to have not just hospital food, but
it's a different quality, isn't it? Something that's handmade on a small scale with love compared to the meals that are delivered in hospital. Yeah.
So all my packages include a welcome home meal and snacks, but a lot of women choose to have ongoing meals, and I'll provide that, usually cook in their home for them as part of that home visit. Mm-hmm. And I've currently got one of my previous postpartum clients has ordered a meal package. So I'm cooking like 4 main meals, some soups and some snacks as a separate service. Our postpartum package is finished, and interestingly, she was a mum that thought at the beginning, I didn't really think that food would be something that I needed, but since you've been coming, I've just loved it. And it's so good to have the freezer stocked up because, as you know, life is busy past the first 6 weeks or even that 4th trimester, and it's handy to have that food. But I guess I always meet with my prospective clients and sit down with them and explore what their vision is, what their ideal is, what their values are, and plan support packages around that. So every woman's needs are going to be individual and quite different. So we formulate, after that initial consultation, I'll formulate a postpartum plan with them based on what they think they're going to need at that time. But it's a fluid plan, and I always say that it's fluid. It will change day by day as your needs might change day by day. So when I come in first thing with a visit, how was your night? Where are you at? What does today look like for you? And that visit will be dictated by where mum's at that particular moment in time. And we might think that it might be a very practical session when I walk in that day and she just needs to pour out what's going on, in her heart and her mind. And it might be simply just giving her a safe place to unload where she's at.
Yeah. So obviously you're speaking to the bespoke nature of your service and how you adapt that to their needs, not only from client to client, but of course from day to day or from visit to visit, which obviously a really important way that most of us work. And we often have to pivot. We might have something in mind, as you said, and then circumstances require us to change. I actually had a prenatal visit yesterday with a new family that I'm supporting, and she had her 2.5-year-old toddler with her. And they'd had a big morning because there'd been an orientation at daycare that morning, and it was the first one, and there was a bit of overwhelm, and she'd envisioned that the toddler would play happily whilst we talk, but it didn't go like that. And so I just said, look, why don't we put her in the pram and go out to walk, and we'll have our visit out walking. And so we did that. And it was fine. We went to the supermarket, got her a little yogurt pouch. She was happy and had a little rest and didn't get to soak her feet, but we got to have a walk and just have to constantly pivot, as we do as parents as well all the time, meeting the needs, changing needs of the family. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, or your insights on, how the work as a neonatal and intensive care nurse informs maybe the way you show up as a postpartum doula, or obviously you said before you're continuing in that role on a casual basis, in part because you like to stay up to date with probably the research and just the goings on in that space and infant care and supporting families. Is there any, I understand that infants who are in neonatal care are unwell, and it's not the average baby who's unwell, so it's different. But what are the threads that sort of cross over between those two spaces for you?
Well, one of the things when parents have had particularly with a very premature infant, and they've been used to having their baby having one-on-one care and monitoring, it's a very, very stressful time when they go home. Any parent taking home a new baby experiences a certain amount of anxiety and overwhelm. If they've had a baby in hospital for, even a short period of time, but especially those ones that have had months, to go home is actually a very, very, very stressful time for them. They worry about temperature in the room. They worry about, leaving the baby alone with someone not watching them. So there's a lot of work in helping them make those transitions of actually stepping back a little bit. You don't need to be taking your baby's temperature every few hours when you're at home, those sorts of things. There's also mums who have just had a baby and they've got a baby in the NICU. All their own physical and emotional needs basically get pushed to the side. A lot of those mums are finding that they're coming into hospital early in the day. They're sitting around at a hospital bed and then they go home late in the day. They're often having to be pumping breast milk. They're sitting around in an environment that is not relaxing. There's a lot of noise. They're not looking after their own nutritional and emotional well-being. So I find, even in the clinical space, while I'm primarily there caring for their baby, in neonatal nursing and paediatric nursing, you never look after the child in isolation to the family unit. And more so in the neonatal intensive care, you are looking after that mother. You're supporting her on her breastfeeding journey. You are listening to her and trying to support her emotionally. I really try to encourage them to get as much rest as they can, to ask for help. At home, I
was curious to know, the families that you support as a postpartum professional, are they some of the same families that are actually emerging from NICU? Because that sounds like they might be in what you're sort of talking about here.
I have had one client that I followed through as a birth doula, and she had a premature baby. So her baby was in the NICU for 4 weeks. And then I cared for her and the baby when they first came home from hospital. So that, I felt, was one case that actually drew on all my skill set, both as a mother with personal experience of having a baby in NICU and going home and what that feels like. Also as an experienced NICU nurse, understanding kind of things concern parents when they're going home.
And did you say that you cared for that same family in NICU?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
No, because that was purely as a doula. So I was actually in the theatre when she had her cesarean. Yeah, so I was present at the baby's birth, accompanied them through recovery and into the special care nursery, left them there, kept contact with mum and partner throughout that special care stay, and provided her with some meals and snacks while she was going in and out of the hospital. and then started up the postpartum care the day after they returned home with the baby.
Such a beautiful way of being able to support a family going through such a challenging time and to offer that continuity of care. It's really extremely valuable, I'm sure, and the relationship would be very meaningful. I was just thinking about, obviously, as a postpartum doula, hopefully a lot of the skills that you need in the NICU you don't need to put into practice, but in the reverse, I imagine that a lot of the skills that you have as a postpartum doula, that you do actually put those into practice in the NICU when you're supporting families. You might not be cooking meals in the hospital, but I'm sure that you said you've been supporting families for decades and under a different title or different sort of understanding of what you were doing. But I imagine that a lot of the skills and support that you have innately as a postpartum professional, you'd be delivering those to the families that you're supporting in NICU as well all the time.
Yeah. It does work both ways, I think. And I'm now building some experience in the postpartum support area. So, bring that experience into the NICU space, definitely. I'm very aware of scope of practice and boundaries, and I make that quite clear, particularly to my postpartum clients, that I won't be providing any nursing, obstetric or
clinical
midwifery advice or opinion or care, but it does give them confidence, I guess, that I have got that experience and skill set as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it would do. You would know when to refer, even if you're not providing clinical care. If you see something's not right, you would be letting them know, and they'd be very confident that you know what you're talking about. So that would be reassuring in itself, I'm sure. Hi everyone, I'm just interrupting our conversation briefly to let you know that the new business program that I developed for doulas, the Savvy Doula, launched at the end of the year, and I have 12 people journeying through the early bird cohort, testing it out for me and providing really excellent feedback so far, which is super exciting. So that will be opening up to the rest of you again in a couple of months' time. And I want to tell you in the meantime about my other offering and the other way that you can work with me this year. So while the Savvy Doula is very much focused on helping you to develop your business skills, my other program, the Intuitive Doula, is more about helping you to develop your confidence, your intuition, and your interpersonal skills as a doula, all whilst cultivating a really strong community of fellow doulas who will journey alongside you. The Intuitive Doula is a 9-month mentoring container to help you foster a consistent support network and develop the confidence you need to show up in your own business in your own unique way, to move through your self-limiting beliefs and unpack the imposter syndrome that many of us feel when we're starting out. It's a 6-module framework that involves lessons focused on working on you, working with clients, working with boundaries, working with others, working with balance, and working with intuition. And the doulas who journeyed through the Intuitive Doula in 2003 said things like it was like a program and a women's circle all tied into one. And that's how it felt to me as well. So I'm really excited to be bringing that to doulas again this year. The program will be starting in March. So I'm taking expressions of interest for folks who want to be on the wait list to come into this container with me and with us. You can either express your interest by sending me an email, hello@marygiordano.com.au, or going to my website and going to the For Doulas section on the navigation bar. The Intuitive Doula is listed under there. You can also follow the link in the show notes to find it. So if this one interests you, then get yourself on the wait list and you will be the first to access a special discount when I'm ready to invite people in. And we'll get back to the conversation now. So a few quicker questions. And the first one is, what do you love best about your role as a postpartum professional?
I love walking the journey and seeing that progress and that transition from that initial visit postpartum, where regardless of how easy or difficult that birth is, it's always going to be a marathon, physical, emotional, spiritual journey. So from that first visit where a mum is often exhausted and physically spent and, the hormones are all over the place, it is so satisfying to see that transition over days and weeks to see a new mum emerging as, feeling confident and trusting herself, and, even in the way that she's then handling her baby and connecting with her baby, but also just seeing, often in that first visit, mum will be really pale and look exhausted and weak, but then you see them flourishing, I guess, and looking strong. And often, sometimes I might only be seeing a mum over 2 weeks. Sometimes it'll be longer, but there's always that. Yeah, absolutely. And I love the relationships that are formed, and my goal is not for mums to be dependent on me. My goal is for them to be empowered and strengthened and confident in themselves as a woman, as a mother, and to see them flourishing and confident, even if they're still in those early days of parenting. Yeah, I just love seeing
transformation. Yeah, it's nothing quite like that, is there? I know that what you mean when you have that first visit and a brand new mum is very insecure, not knowing how even to pick up the baby and not knowing how to move. And then even in a short time later, whether it's 2 weeks or a month or 3 months or whatever it is, the time that we support them and leaving them, and just seeing, the woman who's then got the baby on one hand whilst they're cooking with the other hand or doing something very effortlessly, whereas just a short time earlier, that would have been inconceivable for them. It's really amazing to see that. And briefly, what do you find most challenging?
I was thinking about that, and I don't think it's so much what's challenging about actually doing this kind of work. I think what I find the most challenging is people's concepts or expectations, and often unreal expectations. Firstly, the expectations of that newborn mum that they've got to be able to do it all and get back into who they were before being pregnant, and body changes, and, that expectation that they've got to be up and running and doing everything straight away, once they get out of hospital. Or that attitude that being supported and nourished and nurtured is an extravagance. But also partners' expectations, families' expectations, even our society expectations. We need to be changing that to no, it is an expectation that we should be supporting mums and families right from the get-go, not just expecting them to give birth, jump up out of the hospital bed and be running.
Just carry on like nothing happened.
Absolutely.
As productive members of this society. Yeah. Yeah. There's obviously greater systemic and enormous things at play there that influence on that, or all of the perceptions of what a mother should be or should look like, or all of those things. But obviously collectively we're working to try and change that, and change takes time, but hopefully we will get there for the future generations.
And changing our culture that it does need to be a village that raises a child, but also that raises a mother. Yeah.
Absolutely. So just one final question, and that is, where would you like to take your business? Do you have a future vision that's sort of more elaborate than what your business currently is, or are you satisfied with what it looks like now?
I would like, and this is ideal, I would like to see all mums have the kind of support that I offer. Obviously, I can't do it all, but I would love to see, in a way, maybe that postpartum care could be funded, pie in the sky maybe, but I think every mum deserves and needs to have the kind of support that postpartum doulas provide. What am I going to do personally? I'm going to take it as it comes, word of mouth, do what I can. My second daughter that I spoke about initially, that was a big catalyst for my experience. She's now a neonatal intensive care nurse herself, and she wants to come on board in my postpartum work as well. I think we've got a capacity, and I think that's kind of special, that mother, daughter, mothering, continuing that on. So I suppose as far as my business goes, just wanting to extend the capacity and availability so that every mum has the opportunity, I guess.
So perhaps your daughter will be the first of a team that might be working with you. Yeah, beautiful. I love what you share, and I share that sentiment that, you know, if only all mothers had that sort of support. And it's not actually just the mothers. If only society had all of that support for mothers, because it is society that benefits, you know, more broadly. It's not just the mothers that benefit. It ripples on way beyond our personal lives. So it
has a flow-on effect. Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me, Sharon, and your work in the postpartum space in Hobart. It's been really interesting to hear about, and your unique experience as a 30-year nurse in intensive care and neonatal care. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining me on the Whole Doula podcast.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Mary.
I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation today with Sharon. I really enjoyed listening to the way that her 30-year experience as a neonatal intensive care nurse informs and enriches her practice as a postpartum doula, but also how her work as a postpartum professional enriches her work as a neonatal intensive care nurse. And also really enjoyed hearing how her daughter is inspired to move into business with her in order to serve more families in the Hobart area. I hope you enjoyed listening as well. Thanks so much for listening to the Whole Doula podcast with Mary Giordano. I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation today. If so, please hit subscribe and consider leaving a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. Have a beautiful day.